There's a car parked in front of my shop since last Tuesday. It's a well-maintained 2015 sedan with a clean engine and nearly new tires. The owner told me he'd already been to 2 shops, and both had told him the same thing. "You have to change the battery, sir. There's no other option." He showed me the estimate. New battery, installation, labor, taxes, $480. He asked if I could do it cheaper. I told him I wasn't going to make any changes because his problem wasn't the battery. I asked him to give me a couple of hours and come back in the afternoon. When he returned, the car started right up, without a peep, as if it had never had a problem in its life. I charged him $3. I didn't put in a new battery. I didn't clean the terminals. I didn't do any kind of magic or electronic adjustment. All I did was a simple test that anyone with 2 hands and $3 in their pocket can do in their own garage in less than 10 minutes. The problem wasn't the battery. It was the cable that runs from the battery to the engine, and that cable isn't replaced. It's repaired, and the repair costs $3. I'm going to show you exactly what I did, in the order I did it, what it costs, and where to get it. Because what I discovered years ago, after having replaced hundreds of batteries unnecessarily, is that the automotive industry has a little secret, and that secret is that most problems that seem like battery problems aren't battery problems, they're connection problems, and connections are repaired, not replaced. But nobody's going to tell you that because a repaired connection doesn't cost $480. Stick with me, because by the end of this video, you're going to know exactly how to test your battery, how to find the real problem, and how to fix it for less than the price of lunch. And your car will thank you for not replacing a part it didn't need. Now, before I show you the game changer, the technique that turns this $3 test into a system that can be applied to any car in any situation, I have to mention something. Everything I'm showing you today is just one chapter of a much larger file I've compiled over my years in the shop. I call it the Handyman's Handbook. It's 3 volumes of these simple tests, the diagnostic systems big shops don't want you to know about, the tricks for extending the life of parts, the repair methods your grandfather knew by heart, and the electrical installations anyone can do in their garage without specialized tools. There's a special offer right now for those watching the video. You'll find the link in the description and a QR code in the top right corner of the screen. That's the rest of the hidden knowledge. But let's get back to the battery, because what I'm about to tell you is the piece that changes everything. Let's get to the point. Most people, when their car won't start, immediately think of the battery. That makes sense. The battery is what gives the engine that initial push to start. If the engine won't start, the battery is the first suspect. But I'm going to tell you an uncomfortable truth I learned after 25 years of tinkering with engines. More than 60% of the time, someone tells me, "I need to change the battery." The problem isn't the battery. It's in the path the electricity takes from the battery to the starter motor. Electricity is like water. If you have a hose full of water and you squeeze it at one point, the water doesn't flow with the same force at the end. It's that simple. A car's electrical system works the same way. The battery produces the current, but that current has to travel through wires, through connections, through terminals, and reach the starter motor. If there's resistance at any of those points, a bit of rust, a loose connection, the current reaching the terminal is lower, and if the current is lower, the starter motor doesn't turn strongly. And if it doesn't turn strongly, the car won't start. And then you think the battery is dead. But here's the trick the shops don't tell you. A battery doesn't die suddenly. Batteries die slowly. They lose capacity over time, like a glass that leaks water drop by drop. If your car started perfectly yesterday and won't start today, it's not the battery, it's a connection. Because batteries don't fail overnight. Connections do. A connection can loosen in a single trip. A terminal can corrode in a single rainy day, and when that happens, the whole system collapses like a house of cards. Let me tell you what happened to my client with his 2015 sedan. He came to the shop saying that the car sometimes started and sometimes didn't. He'd taken it to 2 different shops, and both had tested the battery. In both, the test came back positive. The battery was fine, but both told him that the battery is probably failing intermittently and that it needed to be replaced. Do you see? The test said the battery was good and they still wanted to sell him a new one. That's like a doctor telling you your tests are perfect but prescribing medication anyway. It doesn't make sense. What I did was simple. I got my multimeter, which is a tool that measures voltage and resistance. It costs $12 at any hardware store. I put it in voltage mode and measured the battery at rest, 12.6 volts. Perfect. Then I asked my helper to try to start the car while I measured the voltage at the starter motor. And that's where the problem appeared. When the helper turned the key, the voltage at the battery dropped to 11.8, which is a normal drop. But the voltage at the starter motor dropped to 8.3, more than a 3-volt difference. Where did that energy go? Not in the battery, because the battery had it. It went away along the way, in the wires, in the connections, at the points where the electricity encountered resistance. Now here's the piece of information that costs $3. The ground connection, that thick cable that runs from the battery to the car body or engine, is the most overlooked and the most problematic. All the electricity that leaves the battery has to return to it, and it does so through that ground cable. If that cable is loose, dirty, or even slightly corroded, the current doesn't flow properly. It's like having a 4-lane highway going in and a dirt road coming back. The electricity gets stuck on the return trip and the starter motor doesn't get enough power. What I did with the sedan was this. I located the ground cable that runs from the battery to the chassis. I unscrewed it, and with fine grit sandpaper, which costs about $3 for a 5-pack at any hardware store, I sanded the metal surface where the cable makes contact with the chassis. Then I sanded the cable terminal, the metal part that screws into the chassis. Then I sanded the other end of the cable, the one that runs from the battery to the engine. In total, 5 minutes of sanding. Then I screwed everything back on tightly. I measured again, and the voltage at the starter motor had risen to 11.5 volts. The car started like a rocket. The owner paid $3 and drove off with a huge grin on his face. That's what I want you to do this weekend. Don't buy a new battery until you've done this test. $3 for some fine sandpaper or a file, 10 minutes of your time, and the most common starting problem is solved without touching the battery. I'm going to give you the complete list of what you need and the exact order in which you have to do it so you don't skip any steps. First, get a multimeter if you don't already have one. It doesn't have to be expensive. The most basic one from the hardware store, the one that looks like a small radio with 2 metal probes, is more than enough. You don't need a professional $500 piece of equipment. As long as it can measure DC voltage, which is the mode with a symbol of a straight line with a dotted line underneath, that's sufficient. That's the voltage mode that measures the battery's current. Second, open your car's hood and locate the battery. Most modern batteries have a label that shows the purchase date or the date it was installed. If your battery is more than 5 years old and the terminals are swollen or have a layer of blue dust, then yes, it might be time to replace it. But don't do it yet. Test it first. Third, measure the battery's voltage with the car off. Place the red probe of the multimeter on the positive terminal, which almost always has a red cap or a plus sign. The black probe goes on the negative terminal, which has a black cap or a minus sign. The reading should be between 12.4 and 12.8 volts. If it's below 12.4, the battery may be discharged. If it's below 12, it's weak. But don't panic. A discharged battery doesn't necessarily mean a dead battery. It could simply be that it hasn't been used for a long time or that the alternator isn't charging it properly. Fourth, measure the battery voltage while someone tries to start the car. The reading will drop. That's normal, but it shouldn't drop below 10 volts. If it drops to 9 or 8, the battery has low capacity. But here comes the definitive test. Fifth, locate the starter motor. It's a metal cylinder attached to the engine, usually on the bottom or side. It has a thick cable coming directly from the battery and a thinner cable coming from the ignition switch. Place the red probe of the multimeter on the terminal of the thick starter motor cable. The black probe tip, and this is important, do not put the black probe tip on the battery. Put it on a clean ground point, on the engine block, on an unpainted bolt, on a rust-free metal surface. Now while someone tries to start the car, measure the voltage at the starter motor. That reading should be almost the same as what you measured at the battery during the cranking process. If the battery voltage dropped to 11.8 and the starter motor voltage dropped to 11.7, everything is fine. But if the battery voltage dropped to 11.8 and the starter motor voltage dropped to 9.3, there is a voltage drop. Electricity is being lost along the way. Sixth, that voltage drop is almost always at one of three connections: the positive battery cable to the starter motor, the negative battery cable to the car body, or the ground cable from the car body to the engine. Follow the cables, find where they terminate. Every terminal you find, every point where a wire is screwed into a metal surface, unscrew it, sand it, and screw it back on tight. You don't need any special tools. An open-end wrench or an adjustable wrench is enough. And fine grit sandpaper, the kind carpenters use, the kind that costs about $3, is all you need. Once you've sanded all the connections, repeat the starter test. You'll see the voltage rise. You'll see the car start with a force it didn't have an hour ago, and you'll realize the battery had nothing to do with it. Let me tell you another quick story to show you how common this is. A customer came in with a truck that had been to 3 different shops. Every time they replaced something: the battery, the alternator, the spark plugs. They replaced parts worth over $1,000. The truck was still malfunctioning. She brought it to me in desperation. I did the starter test and found a 2-volt drop. I followed the ground wire and found a loose terminal on the chassis, right where the wire bolts to the body. Someone, probably at one of the previous shops, hadn't tightened that terminal properly. I tightened it, sanded the surface, and the truck started right up. The customer didn't want to pay. I told her not to pay me anything, but to tell her friends not to buy new batteries without doing this test first, and that's what I want you to do. Now, this doesn't mean batteries never get damaged. Of course they do. A typical battery lasts between 3 and 5 years. After that time, its capacity starts to decline. But they don't just die suddenly. A dying battery shows signs. Starting becomes slower for several days. The lights dim when you start the car. The engine turns over weaker than usual. If your car suddenly started acting up, starting fine one day and not the next, it's not the battery. It's a connection. Don't let them sell you a new battery when what you really need is a $3 piece of sandpaper. I'm going to talk about something else that many people ignore: the battery terminals, those 2 lead terminals where the cables connect. Over time, they become covered with a layer of oxide that looks like blue or white dust. That oxide isn't just dirt. It's an insulator that prevents the current from flowing properly. If your terminals are dirty, the electricity won't travel well. But this can also be fixed with that same $3 piece of sandpaper. Disconnect the battery cables, always the negative first, and then the positive, and sand both the battery terminals and the cable ends. Then reconnect everything, always positive first and then negative. You'll give your battery new life without having touched it internally. What I'm trying to tell you is that mechanical diagnostics aren't a mystery. It's not something only technicians in lab coats and with computers can do. Anyone who can use a wrench and a multimeter can find most of your car's electrical problems. And you don't need expensive tools. You don't need a computer scanner. You don't need a specialized shop. You need a $12 multimeter, $3 sandpaper, 10 minutes of your time, and the right information. And that information, the information that actually works, is what I'm sharing with you now. Big shops don't want you to know this, because if you can fix the problem in your garage for $3, you're not going to pay the $480 they charge for a battery you don't need. It's that simple. It's not that mechanics are bad people. Most of the mechanics I know are good people, but they're trapped in a system that requires them to sell parts, not solve problems. And I know this sounds harsh, but it's the truth. Years of experience have taught me that the industry is designed to sell, not to repair. That's why it's so important that you can do these tests yourselves, because when you understand how your car works, no one can fool you. And the best part is, these tests aren't difficult. You don't need an engineering degree. You need practice and patience, and the desire not to waste your money. Here's the plan for the weekend. Get your multimeter, open the hood, and test the starter motor. Write down the numbers. Compare them. If you find a voltage drop of more than half a volt, start sanding connections. Start with the ground, always the ground. That's the connection that gets neglected the most and causes the most problems. Then do the other connections, and when you're finished, try it again. You'll see the difference. I want to wrap this up. 25 years ago, when I started working in my first shop, I had no one to teach me these tricks. I learned the hard way, replacing parts that didn't need replacing, spending money I didn't have, and making mistakes until I understood how cars really worked. I don't want you to go through the same thing. Everything I know about these tests, about these simple diagnostic systems, I've compiled into a file I call the Handyman's Handbook. It contains over 300 methods, tests, and tricks that I've used in my shop to solve problems other shops couldn't. And I've decided to share it because I believe people deserve to know how their car works without having to spend a fortune. If you found this video helpful, if you liked the style, and if you want to learn more, I have a special offer for you. You'll find the link in the video description and a QR code in the top right corner of the screen. That's full access to all 3 volumes of the handbook. It contains all the tests I've mentioned today and many more. Diagnostic systems, simple repairs, tools you don't need to buy, and secrets that big chain repair shops don't want you to know. You don't need to buy anything today. But if you want the complete knowledge, the kind that took me 25 years to learn, the link is there. And if not, that's okay too. With what I've shown you today, you already have enough to start saving money and understanding your car better. Let me know in the comments what year your car is and if you've had starting problems. I read all the comments. And if you did this test, tell me how it went. I want to know if you found any loose connections, if you sanded the terminals, if the car started better afterward. That's the difference between a driver and a mechanic. The driver replaces parts, the mechanic finds the problem. And you, with these tools, can be your own car mechanic. Until next time, take care of yourselves and your cars. And remember, the cheapest tools are the ones that solve the most problems.